City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded Monday, May 11, 2020.
I will call the Finance Committee to order. I have 6:35, and the first item of business past calling to order is the designation of the official newspaper. And again, it's kind of like, well, why are we having an official designation? Because there's only one newspaper that ever submits that. So, I'm reminded we should have a roll call. It should be on the agenda. We'll have to remember to do that. So who's going to do, Corey, are you going to do the roll call or?
I certainly can, yeah. So obviously we know we have Alder Johnson, Slowinski.
Here.
Okay. And Shore. No.
He was muted, but I saw his lips. He said here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Dalton.
Here.
Okay, great. And Morrow.
He's also muted, but I saw his lips.
Okay. Sounds good. 5 present.
Okay. Thanks. Moving on. Designation of official newspaper. Sorry for bouncing around, but well, that's the way it goes sometimes. We always have to have this to make sure when we post our official notices. Unfortunately, we don't have a massive amount of choices, do we, Corey?
No, we received one bid from the Portage County Gazette. They are our current official newspaper. For an increase, they bid no increase on publications within the legal section that are actually in the legal column, and then a 4% increase on display ads. So with 0% on one and 4% on the other, it works out to be within reason.
Does anyone have any questions? Any members of the committee have any questions about
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
This is Alder Slowinski.
Oh, go ahead. Thank you.
I
I'm
will
sorry.
move to designate the Portage County Gazette as the official newspaper based
All right.
on the agenda items as far as the rates.
Okay, we have a motion by Alder Slowinski, a second by Alder Dalton to approve the Gazette with the rates as presented. Any discussion? Very well. Waited the 4 or 5 seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Anyone who wishes to abstain? Very good. Nobody wishes to abstain. Motion carries. All right, moving on. Financial impact of current events on the city's financial performance. I asked Corey to put this together just so that we can start getting a little bit of background. I think we all have an idea, but I thought it important for Finance Committee to at least get a head start. We're going to be talking about budget and capital projects before we know it. And so, Corey, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. So I included the memo, which summarizes the financial impacts. Sort of for the big picture, our 2 biggest revenue sources are property taxes and state aid. And those 2 revenue sources, at least for the time being, have not been impacted. We are not aware of any changes for 2020 for state aid. So about 80% of our budget for 2020 is fairly secure in terms of those revenue sources. However, we do have some revenue sources that are not necessarily a huge piece of the budget on a percentage basis, but are going to be affected fairly significantly by the current situation. So I outlined those here, but room tax obviously is going to take a very significant hit. And for room tax, 30% of the room tax that's collected goes to the city general fund. to basically compensate the city for providing services to those guests. And we're expecting a shortfall of about $139,000 there. And that's just the general fund portion. And then also we are expecting a pretty significant impact for parking, both in terms of the parking meters with the university being out of session, and then also parking citations as well. We expect the impact on the general fund for that to be about $60,000. Municipal court, just with reduced activity out in the community, you've got reduced fines. The municipal court gets a portion of each of those. We're expecting an impact of about $56,000. And then fines and forfeitures, so that portion that's retained by the issuing entity, we're expecting about a $75,000 portion, and then about a $25,000 shortfall for parks lodge rentals. And of course, that one is going to be highly dependent on the exact timing of a potential reopening, just because obviously the main time that people like to rent lodges in the parks is during the summer. So with the total, you're looking at a total revenue shortfall of about $355,000. And I want to stress that that's just a projection, that's just an estimate. It could turn out better than that, it could turn out worse than that, just depending on how the situation develops throughout the year. And then I also included a section on impacts beyond 2020. And this is actually where I would say I have a more significant concern because now you're talking about revenue sources that are a lot more significant for the city especially when you start talking about state aid. And the state obviously is very heavily reliant on sales taxes and income taxes. And those two revenue streams are definitely going to be affected from their perspective. We're somewhat lucky that we don't rely on sales taxes as the city. But the state does, and that might have a trickle-down effect where they could have, well, we know that they're going to obviously have some tough financial decisions to make. So that could certainly have an impact on the city. Also, when you look at the state transportation fund, what funds that is fuel taxes, and with driving, people buying less fuel. That's an area of concern, I know, for a lot of municipal finance directors. But we'll see how that situation develops at the state level. But I am fairly concerned what you could potentially have happen. And then obviously property taxes, that will depend on the construction projects that we have for 2020, and if those still move forward or not. I think right now we're still hopeful that a lot of these things will continue to move forward, and as long as that happens, we shouldn't have a significant impact there. But you know, we will see how the situation develops. And then the final item that I covered is the investment revenue. Luckily, we have a 5-year CD ladder, and the concept is basically that you have about 1/5 of your portfolio mature every year, so that only about 1/5 is readjusted at any one time, and that also allows you to have some liquidity, that you always have something coming due every year in case you need the money. And the reason why I included our investments in this is so that you can kind of see that right now, for instance, for 2020, the deposit that's maturing actually has a somewhat low interest rate. So I don't expect that interest rate will change a lot when we renew it this fall. But if you look at how our deposits are structured, you can see that the farther out that we go, especially once you start getting into 2022, 23, and 24, that those interest rates are a little bit higher. And of course, it's a very different thing when you have a deposit maturing that's 3 1/4 and now it drops to 1 1/2. Well, that's very different than if, you have a deposit that's only 1.55% and maybe it drops a little bit. So for that one, I expect the most significant impacts in terms of investment revenue and interest revenue to really be more 2022 through 2025. So at least we have a couple of years to plan for any impact from that perspective. So
Thank you, Corey. I'm glad that the Finance Committee and you recommended to the Finance Committee the laddered structuring of the investments. That's what we do for the investments that I have for my landfill. That's exactly how we do it. It is protective. So hopefully by 2023 things will be good and we can get 3.5% again. Haha. So
yeah, we can hope.
yeah, we can hope. Yeah, good rundown. And I know what you say that the room tax and some of those other revenue streams aren't big portions of our landfill, big portions of our budget, but they are a considerable amount to recover from if we don't have it in our budget. So $350,000 is nothing to sneeze at. So.
No, and I would agree 100%. And, the thing is, because our budget is so tight, even if that number, when you look at it on a percentage basis, might not seem like a lot, it makes a big difference because you just don't have the wiggle room there. So it is definitely a concern. And if this is only a 1 year type thing, if this is a 1 year type hit, I think that with the financial performance that we had from 2019, I think we can kind of offset that as far as having, okay, 1 good year and 1 bad year and kind of having that all work out. But certainly if this is going to be sort of an ongoing impact where it's not just a one-time thing, but it's a recurring issue, then that's a very different story for sure. And then the only other thing that I'll note is as far as what would happen if hypothetically, if things continue to get worse or if we have some more significant budget impacts. Basically, at the end of every year, we look at how the city has performed financially and how much money we can roll into capital. So, right now, I'm hoping that we're still going to have a decent amount of money to roll into capital for 2021 capital. But certainly if things get worse than this, or if we have other funding requests or other expenses that we need to incur, then that can start to create an issue as far as the amount of money that we have available to roll into capital for 2021.
Yeah. Questions for Corey from the members of the Finance Committee? Waiting my 10 seconds to make sure everybody has a chance. Go ahead. Who is going to speak? Ooh, Alder Slawinski, are you asking to speak? You're on mute, or was that Alder Murrow?
It was Alder Slobinski. He was going to speak.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yep.
Nope, sorry. No, I don't have a question. It's more of a comment. Again, let's just hope that we can get past this here sooner than later, like I'm sure everybody's thinking, and get back to somewhat normalcy. I mean, I know it's going to take a while, but we got to start making some baby steps here to get things back to normal. That's all I had.
Thank you.
I had a quick question.
Okay, Alder Dalton, go ahead.
All right. This obviously covers revenue shortfalls. Is there any projected savings or with just less activity going on in the city that we can expect, or maybe that would be an item for the future meeting to see if there's any upside to this current situation?
Good question. Do you have anything off the top, Corey, or was that something you could probably come back with after checking with the departments?
Yeah, one thing that I'm aware of is that with the less activity, the police department has indicated that they don't need to call back as many people for overtime. So I think that is one positive. And certainly I can check as far as with the other departments in terms of other, reductions that they might have. It depends, for some things there's an ability to reduce expenses. For others. So for instance, like the municipal court, where you're looking at it missing about half of its revenue potentially, where you have sort of fixed costs related to staffing, where sometimes you have the revenues can go down and even the workload can go down, but the expenses stay the same. So, but I can gather a little bit more information as far as what we can expect for any offsets on the expense side.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Alder Dalton. It was a good question. I wonder too about the lower fuel costs, if that might help as well. So if make a note and we can add that back on to on next month's. Alder Dalton, you have something else? No. Alder Shore, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the references to the money that we get through the state government. We've all seen in the news that the issue keeps coming up in Congress for these bills of when is one of the federal bills going to help state governments. So I just thought I'd comment that that affects us, particularly on the capital side, and particularly in public works, there was discussion of Business 51, which is something that we're going to be looking towards the state and federal government for help, and classically. Transportation highway bills are something that happens as a form of stimulus in downturns. So it's all a long way of saying, the stake that we have in aid to states, and maybe we should all consider writing our representatives. Thanks.
Certainly a thing we can do. Any members of the council who have questions for Comptroller Treasurer? Any members of the public? Oh, Alder Nabel, go ahead.
Thank you. And this may not be much of anything, but I know that when we talked way back about free overnight parking, how much that made a difference if we did have free, that it would take about $10,000 off of the budget for the police department. With less people, that'll probably be using that. That probably wouldn't make a difference, but I'm wondering if we should be very cognizant of the fact that not to too quickly make that ordinance for free overnight parking or any other of these small things that might add up to dollars that we could still be able to put into our budgets. Maybe it's silly to think of. I know it's not a lot of money, but I even noticed that lately that we've seen cars that are here at night. I don't know if they paid overnight or not, but we haven't seen the police come through here as much for parking, even when there is parking during the day. So, just those things themselves, I know that, and also our ordinance violations and other things that are going on. It's not that we're trying to dig money, but we should also be very aware that that money is something we can use within all the departments when we need it. And I just want to make sure that we're not just going to let things kind of slide too much in those areas or change things where we can't afford to lose payments that come in.
Good points. All right. Any other questions for Comptroller Treasurer? All right. Thanks, Corey. That was really helpful. Very, very well done. I appreciate it. It was very informative. All right. Next item on the agenda. Hang on. I gotta switch screens here. Operation of the municipal pool for the current year. Our Director Kramer, I saw you. Yes, there you are. I will hand it over to you.
Chairperson Johnson, is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'd like to thank the chairperson and Corey for allowing me to put this on the agenda tonight. We've been working, as you can imagine, with several things, several communities across the state trying to make plans for our summer operations. The guidance we were waiting on from the state was not released in time for the Park Commission meeting last Wednesday. So ultimately, the Park Commission just discussed real briefly in the director's report what we were considering doing for this summer. The guidance did come out Friday. So with that information, there's obviously a fiscal impact of the pool operations. That's why I have it, or I've asked to be here tonight to talk about this piece, really to tell you what we've planned, what we're thinking, and get some feedback ultimately from you as alders in the committee as we make a determination of what we're going to do going forward. I just have 8 quick slides. I'll try to keep it as basic as I can. Obviously, I'll take as many questions that come up as you'd have at the end of it. The things I wanted to discuss primarily are is how does the Badger Bounce Back Plan impact the pool operations, and what are we able or not able to do this summer? Primarily focusing on things like staffing, training, PPE, the duties that they'll be required to do if we do open, the fiscal impact, the concerns from us as a management team when we've looked at our operations. We also organized a region planning meeting last Friday afternoon so we could talk with municipalities that surround us, so we're all pretty consistent as we tackle this item, and then a recommendation to proceed. I want to start by saying, as you can imagine with pool operations, safety is the first thing for us. So even on a traditional year, I call it, we're always trying to take extra precautions to make sure our lifeguards and our staff are trained properly so we can allow our spectators and people that come with their families as pool patrons that safe environment. This year, obviously, we're adding in to not spread COVID-19 as one of those larger hurdles that we have to overcome or plan for. A big disclaimer here, some of the things I'm going to present probably seem glass half full. There's no bigger advocate of trying to open the pool than myself and my staff. I'll give the crew that we've been working through with our team. We've tried to plan for a lot of different options. We've kind of put 3 different timelines together. We would love to open the pool, but there is several challenges that we want to be cognizant of and we have to take into consideration here as we look to deal with COVID-19 and what this pool season could look like. So the Badger Bounce Back Plan that I referenced, phase 1, as you're probably all aware, is 10-person mass gathering limits. That essentially shuts down the pool for phase 1. That would put us just with lifeguards alone over that quota. Looking at phase 2 with a 50-person mass gathering limit, that would allow approximately 35 bathers in our pool. With our staff being 12 to 15 on our rotation with lifeguards in attendance, essentially having 100 people at the pool would not be allowable underneath that phase 2. Phase 3 is where we'd resume normal business activity underneath the Badger Bounce Back Plan. So the phases were a big piece of what we've looked at. The staffing that I mentioned, on a typical year, lifeguard staff really begin their employment with us mid-May to late May. And the intention is we get our training schedules together. We make sure our certifications and our paperwork are in line. We go over anything from our communication signals to how it's going to work when they're moving from location to location, different duties, training new staff with returning staff. This year, as you can imagine, with the spring basically going out the window, a lot of those training sessions that maybe our lifeguards would have taken at the YMCA or through the Red Cross Association, a lot of those didn't happen. So we're working a little bit behind the 8 ball here in terms of what do we have to get done in a short amount of time. We actually have not done any in-house training. We don't have anyone certified on the staff currently to do lifeguard certifications. Typically, we've recruited lifeguards from other pool locations or from other regions, maybe students that are coming here for college that are already certified. So again, that's one item we've got to deal with. We estimate that it takes 3 weeks for us to train the staff, get them up to par of what we need, as well as for our certified pool operators to balance the chemistry of the water. So it's not something that we can necessarily flip a switch on. It does take a couple weeks. Really, 3 is a safe estimate to say we're going to be ready. I referenced that guidance that we were waiting on that the Park Commission wasn't able to review last week. It came out on Friday afternoon from the Wisconsin Department of Health, and it states that all pools must have attendants that are assigned only to basically social distancing patrols. So They have to ensure that group sizes are meeting whatever phase we're in, that social distancing is being observed, and they have to enforce that. So as you can imagine, a traditional pool visit would involve coming and that happy feeling and getting in the water and enjoying yourself. We're going to have people on the deck that are basically acting like patrol, which is going to be reminding kids, hey, get away from each other, stuff like that. That is not ideal in a pool scenario. High contact areas such as doorknobs, counters, armrests, bleachers, the we're getting is basically guidance that says they should be cleaned frequently. While we do have a cleaning regimen, this one would have to be much more intensive. When exchanging paper and coin money, they talk about putting it on the counter, picking that money up, washing your hands, not touching your face, washing that counter every time. As you can imagine, in a pool where it's a couple dollars to get in, we do handle a lot of cash. Rides or amusements that cannot be sanitized between uses, example, play equipment in common areas, are recommended to be closed, which could impact things like the slides or kiddie pool areas, some of our attractions, diving boards. Temperature checking was not included in the guidance for people coming to the pool, but it has been part of the conversations with some of our regional and upper Midwest regional planning meetings we've been in. So that's kind of a question mark of, is that something that's going to be required for our pool operations? Right now, that answer is no, but we're trying to plan for it. Our concessions, the snack shack, would be closed, given all the guidance around surrounding food and serving. Again, I mentioned the slide pool, the kiddie pool. Those are locations that if we can't disinfect properly, we'd have to close those attractions too. Lastly, then underneath this staffing is just the ability to secure and provide the PPE, water tolerant masks for the lifeguards if they're going to be going into the water for rescues, as well as those attendants, people that are taking money, the masks and PPE that will be required for them when people are coming in and out of the pool. The next slide just talks about the fiscal impact, which was included in your packets. So in case you weren't aware, the pool is subsidized. So we're very fortunate here, the Common Council, our elected leaders, you guys have been very supportive of our pool operations so that people in our community are able to use that pool. A lot of people that might not be able to go down to the Dells or might not be able to go to different vacation locations. We have Donald Cox Municipal Pool here, and a traditional subsidy is about $87,000. Again, the investment in the pool, we took in, it's really important to us, as you can imagine. And again, we feel gracious to be able to operate the facility. But I did want to show you that the 2018 actual, you'll see, was about $73,500-ish is what our actual was. So it was underneath the budgeted subsidy. But if you compare 2019, you'll recall we had 2 weeks in which the pool broke down, which cost us 2 weeks of revenue, as well as our contracted labor went up to fix that repair that was unbudgeted, which resulted in about $100,000 fiscal impact for a subsidy in 2019. What we wanted to be able to show you, or what I wanted to be able to show you tonight, is what scenarios are we dealing with from a fiscal standpoint. We use the 35% normal attendance rate, basically assuming if a normal day would be 100 or 125, what if 35 people came through that door based on the numbers we're being told? And if that were to happen, again, we're pretty conservative in some of these estimates, but we're saying if we opened in a normal traditional second week of June, it could be a $109,000 impact. Looking at July 1st, we estimate that impact to be about $94,000. Again, the revenue would come down, but that also would bring down the staffing cost quite a bit. And then just for comparison purposes, I just followed Corey, obviously, with some of the fiscal impact of the city as a whole. We said, what would happen if the pool closed this summer? How would that look? Again, conservatively said about $43,000. We do have to still fire the pool up and still do some of the maintenance. We anticipate some of the utilities. Some of these things we budgeted on the high end and left the full budgeted amount, even though this number would probably be less. But if we give kind of a good snapshot, basically 109, 94, or 43. So taking that a step further, just to kind of summarize this whole discussion or to kind of frame it up, our concerns were basically the safety of the staff and the public. So are we opening a gathering attraction where people are going to hang out and that we could have some COVID transmission if something were to happen in our city or in our region? The ability to monitor and enforce the social distancing. Again, we want it to be a positive place if we open it. How do we balance that positivity with also enforcing the guidelines we're being told? The limited number of attendants in phase 1 is out the window. Phase 2 would be difficult. Limited attractions. So if the slide and the kiddie pool, the diving boards, those things are closed, what kind of environment are we promoting? And then that ability to secure the PPE necessary. Looking at it as a whole, again, there's some financial risk. As you see, the pool is subsidized, so it's not as substantial as if we went from a huge revenue number to no revenue, but there is some financial impacts, which plays a role. As we were looking at it, we really thought for us to come at this objectively, we needed to talk as a region. So we organized a call on Friday with the city of Wausau, Marshfield, Wisconsin Rapids, Weston, Merrill, Rothschild, Schofield, and a few other non-municipal pools up in the central Wisconsin region. And we talked about if one pool closes or another pool opens, it's very likely that pool patrons may travel and say, okay, I can run 20 minutes up the interstate, I'm going to do that. And is that good or not good for neighboring areas? And again, looking at the transmission or the potential spread of COVID-19, it was a unanimous recommendation by the end of our call on Friday that we would consider phase 3 the best move for us as municipalities to consider opening our pools in the Badger Bounce Back Plan. When we talked about that, we said, okay, phase 3, we still need to have a drop dead deadline of when does it pay to go through the 3 or 4 weeks of prep work on a pool to open it up. And we felt that July 1st was the best date for that. If we don't open by July 1st, where we could get a 5 to 6 week season in the middle of August, it doesn't pay, in our opinion, our professional judgment, when we went through and kind of ran the numbers. We also said if you're to open July 1st, you do need a couple weeks to get the staff ready and the pool chemistry right to make it safe, as well as implement your safety plan. If we use the 3-week timeline, we believe June 15th to be that best time to allow us to train the guards and the staff, get ready, as well as balance that pool chemistry. So the take-home message of this framework, and again, then I'll take questions, and I'd love to kind of get feedback on this, is we as a staff, as well as the region, are recommending to all of our different boards and committees that we're meeting with this week, that we would operate our municipal pools for 2020 with that phase 3 as the threshold. If we hit phase 3 of the Badger Bounce Back Plan, we would open if it happens before July 1st. Using July 1st as drop dead opening date, but really June 15th as declaration date of phase 3. And I just wanted to note, if this is what comes out of this discussion here, things that we can't account for, we do have staff kind of lingering and waiting. So obviously we'd have to tell them we're not opening in the first part of June, we're waiting for that declaration. But places like grocery stores, gas stations, Quick Trip, they are hiring. And a lot of our staff are seasonal students that are looking for jobs. So a risk we do run is we could lose a number of staff, and that could happen already now. So if that would be to the point where we couldn't staff the pool, we may be forced to close. But we didn't want to just shut the door on this. We thought this was a good way to approach it, where we could open if things fall into place. This gives us a few weeks here yet to kind of see where this environment goes between now and, say, June 1st. But that we would allow us to tell our staff and plan here from a budgeting standpoint that this is a good plan to maybe open, not close the door on it, but also be responsible under the COVID. So that was my presentation. Again, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Director Kramer. Well, it's disappointing. It's, I'm sure, not a surprise to any of us that we're having this conversation. First of all, any members of the committee that would like to ask Director Kramer questions about his proposal, his calculus, and the regional approach, which I think is amazing to do. So congratulations on that collaboration. Committee members.
I guess my biggest question is, if July 1st is the soonest open, is there a contingency if it's July 15th, or is there a hard deadline for when it's too late for it, that it makes sense to open the pools regionally?
That was what our July 1st date would be. So essentially, if we weren't able to open the doors for July 1st, say the declaration for the phase 3 was July 10th, we would remain closed.
Okay.
Right. Alder Shore. You're on. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. No, that was all very clearly presented, and so thanks to Director Kramer and his colleagues for that work. It makes a lot of sense, and even more than that, we're given not only the professional opinions of our staff, but this entire set of municipalities who want to take a coordinated approach for the very good reason that you don't want to kind of push push the traffic in the direction of some, if only some are open.
Right.
So I think we'd be hard pressed to go against that advice, and so we should probably take it.
I tend to concur with you on that. It was incredibly well thought out. The calculus is really, really well done in the considerations. Alder Morrow, do you have any questions? Alder Slowinski, oh, there you are. I didn't see your face. There's your name. Did you have any questions for Director Kramer? And if you are, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank
I'm
you.
having some audio problems here.
Okay, all right. We'll keep checking back with you. Any questions from members of the council? Alder Zarazua.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, well, can you hear me okay? My
Absolutely.
Wi-Fi is spotty. Okay.
You bet.
So if we're not able to open the pool, I'm just thinking of what potentially might happen is that we'll have more people at our beaches, at city parks. Do we have a responsibility as a municipality as far as social distancing and all of that at our beaches?
That's a very fair question. And actually, I was in conversations earlier today with Gary Garsky from the health department just about that very topic. So right now, the way we've handled our beaches is that they're not guarded. They're public spaces, and people are quote unquote able to use them at their leisure. The guidance for campgrounds, for example, that came out said that pools had to be closed. This is for May 1st, so this is a couple weeks ago, but pools had to be closed. Beaches were allowed to be open with social distancing being observed. So essentially, from an enforcement standpoint, we would have to work with the police department again if we get to a scenario where we have, I'm going to call it congregation happening on the beach areas that we need to do some sort of enforcement with. I would envision working with the health department, probably some sort of signage, and then really wait and see what we're observing before we, put a hard policy in place or look at closures or things of that nature. But it's a very valid concern. As you can imagine, if pools are closed across the area, where are you going to go if it's a hot summer day and your children want to swim? Probably the closest beach.
Thank you.
Alder Nabel, you had a question?
Well, I agree. This is Alder Zarazua asked the very question I was concerned about. I do think that the pool, everything that he came up with was very well done. And the fact that you've discussed this with other municipalities is wonderful. It's all how we should all be working on these things because we all will be affected, all the municipalities together. So to not do that, it would be really crazy. And I'm just so impressed with the work that you did on this. Have you at all talked about beaches at all with any of these other municipalities and their thoughts on this? And
no, the only beach conversations I've had, other than with Gary Garsky, was with Ryan Rose, the County Parks Director. But we can definitely dive into that as basically next topic.
Yeah, I think it's necessary because I can really foresee some real issues there. And again, of how do you enforce that? I think it needs to be, but I don't know. Thank you.
Thank
for all your
you.
work on that. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was very well done. Other questions from other members of the council haven't spoken yet? Any comments? Any members of the public listening? If you have a question or a comment for the director, and I will end the awkward silence. Director Kramer, I'm assuming you're looking for some sort of direction from the Finance Committee on on the direction we would like you to kind of keep going. Is that it?
Yeah, I guess if action could be taken along the recommendation for the phase 3, it would be helpful on my end. Obviously, we'll be collaborating with the other municipalities too when they get their action done as well.
So you would like action?
Yes, please.
To affirm the phase 3?
Yep, the phase 3 and the July 1st.
And the July 1st. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I have one question. Is this similar calculus to what you're doing for Riverfront?
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately that will be, we have a meeting scheduled Friday to really dive into it.
Okay.
And ultimately the Badger bounce back plan plays a large role as we evaluate and finish that determination as well.
All right, thank you. All right, the director is looking for a motion. What says the members of the finance committee?
Move to approve the pool opening as approved for the Badger Bounce Back Phase 3.
All right, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. So motion by Morrow, second by Dalton. Any additional conversation, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No. Any abstentions? Alder Slawinski, were you able to vote? I'm still cognizant of your audio problems.
I'm having some audio issues. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very spotty. You're very kind of breaking up. Did you vote on the motion?
Yes, I voted in favor. And
All right,
I'm
thank you.
having the same issue on my end. It's really chopped. It's like broken up. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, well, hope you fix that. That sucks otherwise.
So if I drop off here, I'm going to try to
Okay, all right, thank you. We still have a quorum even if you do drop off. All right, motion carries. There's your direction, Director. Thank you so much for a really, really well done presentation.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda. Mailing, I cannot talk. Mailing absentee ballot applications to every registered voter for the remaining 2020 elections. And of course, there's a primary in August and then the general election in November. I had approached, actually, I was approached by a number of people, including some members of the League of Women Voter, just asking about the possibility of the city doing this or the county. And I immediately reached out to both Clerk Fillon and Clerk Krautkamer and started a conversation. And so this is what this is about. And the fact of the matter is it's on finance because it has financial implications. So there's this sort of ideological question, which we're not going to get into. We're looking more at the financial implications and of course the implications of trying to keep everybody safe and also allow the clerk's lives to be less chaotic than they were in April. So I would look to Clerk Krautkamer to at least start the conversation and what she's been pulling together for information.
Sure, thank you. When this was first brought to my attention, my first thought was, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's reach out to all the voters and provide them information in regards to their options. And when it was first thought to send paper applications, and I really started thinking about that and what the result might be and crunching some numbers. My first thought went to, well, that's not the recommended method for requesting an absentee ballot. The recommended method is to utilize the My Vote Wisconsin website because that is a direct link to WisVote, the state operated voter database. And the Wisconsin Elections Commission is constantly making improvements to the My Vote Wisconsin website, which allows our voting population to update their voter registration information, locate their polling place, see what's on the ballot, and also request an absentee ballot. Also, the Wisconsin Elections Commission is looking to make some improvements and add a tracking feature in a way that people can track their purchases. When you have a parcel coming to you, you can track it through the United States Postal Service. So they're also looking at a tracking system and incorporating that with the absentee ballots mail system, which would be great. It would just answer everyone's questions. So we really want to educate people on My Vote and have a lot of our folks be directed there. So with that thought in mind, you know, the paper applications is an antiquated system. It's necessary for some people, and we're happy to provide that. But sending that out as a mailing, there is a huge cost in the postage and the mailing and the resources. There is an impact on that. And then the return, the result, the manual input of that request information would be a huge amount of work. And so I was kind of basing my numbers on, if we sent out over 13,000 paper applications and we received 50% back, it would take over 300 hours for us to manually enter those into WizVote. And with the My Vote Wisconsin, when someone requests it through the website, that is a direct link, and we just received that notification through an email. That request is already logged in the system, and it's very easy for us to then process it through and print those mailing labels out and get that absentee ballot out. So there's a cost savings when people do use the My Vote Wisconsin website. The other thought that I had in having the city of Stevens Point do a mailing out to their voters is that it would cause some confusion for some of the folks that are in our neighboring municipalities, but have a Stevens Point address. And that would create probably a lot of questions, and why weren't they included, and questions like this. I did have some really good conversations with County Clerk, Kayla, and we're basically on the same page where we would love to provide our voters with that education piece and direct them to My Vote Wisconsin if possible, but also offer some of our senior population that option to utilize that paper application and assist them through, you know, how we can get that done for them. So.
All right, a great analysis on your memo. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's really good information. And I appreciate you listening to my idea and taking it and running with it and coming up with, I think, some really good solutions. So I appreciate your time with that. I'm also going to ask, I see that County Clerk Fillon is on. Kayla, I think that's your telephone number. Would you like to provide any additional information for the Finance Committee on some of the things that you've looked at that maybe Clerk Kramer has not covered?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, still getting used to this whole Zoom thing and technology. So like Carlin had said, we've had a couple great conversations, and I've had conversations with Melissa as well on what route to take. What's the best method that we can get the information out to voters? Our initial thought, mine and Carlin's, I think, was, yes, of course, we want to make sure that as many people that want to vote can vote. We're going to try to make that happen the best way that we can. When Carlin provided me with her numbers, it was kind of, you know, not shocking, I guess, but it prompted me to go and just look at countywide numbers. I realize this is the Stevens Point Finance Committee, but as Carlin had mentioned, that it, depending on what you guys do, it could potentially, you know, spark some other interest throughout the county, whether that's by municipalities or residents. You know, do I want to be part of this, or why wasn't I part of this if someone outside of Stevens Point didn't get a mailing? So I just wanted to look at the numbers from the county perspective. And just to give you a rough estimate, we have about 42,600 voters, registered voters in Portage County. Currently, with requests on file, we have about 5,600 people. So if we were to do this on a county-wide perspective, mailing out an application to all registered voters, that would be about 36,000 people. And based on our mailing cost, it would be about $1 per person or per mailing. And that's just to get that application out to people. That doesn't include if there's people that return their applications incomplete, and then we have to do an additional mailing. The labor costs that Carlin had mentioned, that comes into play, of course. And then there's also the mailing of the absentee ballot and that postage. I did reach out, again, from the county perspective to all the municipal clerks in Portage County, just to see where they stand. You know, if Stevens Point does this or is looking to do this, are you guys on board? Do you want Portage County to be on board? I'm not coming in saying this is something that has to be done. I want to be a support in whatever way I can. A lot of the clerks that I heard back from were very hesitant, mainly because of the cost that would be associated with mailing these out, and said, you know, maybe we can do this if Portage County can help. As I think is the case with many people, Portage County, as far as my election budget, is already over budget because of the shenanigans from the April election. So we're not really in a position to do such a large mailing for the whole county. Obviously, I'd like to help if I could, but that's kind of where we're at right now. But the other aspect of this was, again, manpower. There are certain municipalities that are lucky enough to have additional people that could help, but there's also a lot of clerks that work individually. You know, it's just them. They're working part-time. They might have another full-time job and they do this on the side. So, you know, what additional labor are we putting on these people, on these clerks, and expecting, what more are we expecting from them? So there was just a lot that we had to consider between the labor and the cost. And I actually had a great conversation with Melissa and Supervisor Vinnie Moresi, and then County Executive Holman this past Friday about, you know, what can we do possibly instead of a mailing. And again, this is something like, if Stevens Point goes forward with this, that's great. I'll be supportive as much as I can. But another thing that we had brought up, and maybe Melissa can speak more to this, is we want to do some type of outreach. So some type of, I had mentioned Rock the Vote Portage County. So getting out there, you know, being active on social media and in the media and making posters, you know, getting the businesses involved that are opening back up and educating people on getting absentee ballots or getting registered to vote. So I think that's something that we can do that would cost a lot less money. And I don't know about everyone else, but I'm pretty excited about that. And I think it has a lot of potential. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole thing. But again, I'll be supportive of whatever is decided at the municipal level. So.
Thank you, Kayla. I appreciate it. Appreciate that you're taking the time to sit in on a city finance committee meeting. So thanks. After the meeting we had on Friday, as Clerk Fillon had mentioned, we had Executive Holman, Supervisor Moresi, because on the county side, Supervisor Moresi and I are working on this and trying to figure out how we can, again, encourage people to vote, but to get that done early so that, and get people registered, and so we don't have a big health issue come November, because there is a risk of a resurgence of not only COVID, but of course seasonal flu. After the call on Friday, I was really excited about the idea of transitioning my original idea, which I of course got from the clerk or the alderperson in the city of Milwaukee, to this idea of outreach and education and a really big promo. And it reminded me very much of the complete count committee for the 2020 census, which I chair for the county. And that group is very diverse. It's a wide range of people. And we have really just pumped out the information, the outreach. We've done a lot of promo. And Portage County is actually in the top 100 nationally of all counties responding to the 2020 census. And I give the Complete Count Committee, full credit for that, because it really was a big effort. We could employ that kind of effort in a collective way on voting as well. So did I miss anything, Kayla?
No, I don't think so. I guess the last thing that I wanted to just add is, I think there are a large portion of the population that will take the initiative and request an absentee ballot on their own, which is what happened in April. We had a pretty decent turnout with all things considered. But as Carlin had mentioned, and I don't think she got into too much detail on that, but one thing that she had told me on Friday is we want to, get to those people that might not use the My Vote, which we would be encouraging. And we had briefly talked about, okay, do we get our libraries involved? Do we make those, stations where people can come in and apply for an absentee ballot, whether that's on paper or if they're going on the computer and applying on My Vote and having someone help them. Yes, that's still someone coming out in person and having that physical contact. But if we can try to eliminate more people coming on election day at the polls, then, we certainly would like to try to do that. So I think there's just a lot of things that we can do. And I think that we have great people. And if we get our heads together, we can make this work and, keep costs down and get a lot of people voting.
Thank you.
I agree. I did have an opportunity to talk with the executive director for this elections for the city of Milwaukee, and they are still considering doing a mailing, and they're actually crafting a mailing piece, but they are not mailing out paper applications. So they're going to utilize a mailer or something in order to reach out to their voting population. But in talking with Neil, I did learn that the Wisconsin Elections Commission is also considering doing a statewide mailer.
Wow.
And so we might not want to compete with a statewide mailer and cause more confusion. So I do have an email out to the WEC, but I haven't received any information on that yet. So, but I did get some good information, and Neil actually provided me the idea of utilizing the libraries for our population that may not have internet or computers, and have that as a stop where they could be assisted by the librarian, they could be assisted on the computer and request that absentee ballot. So I thought that was a great idea. And we may actually be able to use them maybe as a drop-off point for absentee ballots in lieu of mailing, which would be a cost savings if we change how we do the postage on our return envelopes.
This is so like the Complete Count Committee. It's just like it's mirroring that, because those resources, those community resources, libraries and churches, and that's where people go for information, and they're always willing to be partners in that, and that's wonderful. Does the committee have questions of either of the clerks or the discussion of the topic?
I have a question in regard to the voters.
Sure.
I cover a lot of UWSP, and I remember in 2016 there were a lot of college kids who waited till the last minute to register to vote, and the line was quite long. Are there any other plans besides trying to do outreach? Because I know that the city, and there was a lot of outreach at the college, but again, a lot of the students did not. I mean, they just waited until actual election day to register to vote, and the lines at the Stevens Point Visitor Center was quite long.
I think we would need to take that into consideration. Maybe we work with a local vendor who gives out free ice cream cone if you register early or something. I have no idea, but
I don't think it'd be ice cream cone.
all right, well, it could be something else. I'm not, all of them are not 18 or not 21, so we can't offer an alcoholic beverage. But I think there are ways to encourage participation using some of those ideas. But your point is well taken. Those lines were very, very long in 2016. Alder Shore, I believe you had your hand up.
Thanks, and my thanks also to the clerks for not only the work that you've done on this, which is extremely helpful, but also all of the work that went into the spring election. So many factors to consider here. I'm reluctant to leave entirely the idea of a mailing. I'm just, any of us who I think goes out and canvasses in the neighborhoods, you have to be struck how many people don't vote. Right? It's the addresses that we don't stop at because they don't come up, right? And some of those aren't even registered, which is a separate problem. But I'm not comfortable saying that a communications campaign is going to do the job. If there are things to be carried over from the successful census effort, great. But I think if we're taking the issue seriously of the non-voters and really trying to increase their chances of participation, I would like to keep a mailing under discussion on the table, under consideration, maybe looking for ways to sort of hem it in and bring it down to a manageable scale. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that people who have figured out how to request absentee ballots would not be the ones that we would be concerned about, right? So that maybe would take care of the number there to an extent. The point is, of course, well taken that if you're talking literally about sending out the application, how that pulls people away from online, that doesn't necessarily make sense. It does create more work maybe than is necessary and makes for a more expensive mailing. So I think for sure to get away from definitely sending the application rather than something, a card or whatever that presents the options, including requesting a paper ballot application, absentee ballot application. But I'd rather we don't leave the discussion and the option yet, but maybe looking at it in the way of getting it, getting some of the more labor-intensive and more cost-intensive pieces out, like I just said, and seeing if it can't be done in a manageable way. Of course, yeah. If something's done across the whole state, that will take care of the issue for us. But I think our recent experience with the last election does not make me think that's likely to happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee have questions or comments for the clerks? Any members of the council?
President Johnson, Alder Nebon here. I have a question.
Certainly.
I don't know the timing. I don't know the timing of requesting an absentee ballot in the fall. Could there be something put in the the water bill that goes out in September, don't forget to order your absentee ballots at myvote.gov. Would that, I don't know how much it would cost to add something or a little flyer or an insert into the water bill.
I think that's a great idea. Those are just the kind of things we talked about in the complete count committee.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Just a quick thing, as far as timing goes, I obviously can't speak to the water bills, but people do have until the Thursday before the election to request an absentee ballot. Clearly, we try to encourage people to do that much sooner, because it does take several days for the mail. You know, when we get the request in, we then have to send it out in the mail, and some people will want to return it in the mail or drop it off. But you know, they do have quite a bit of time up until the election to request a ballot. But I think with us being in May, and we know this is going to be an issue, we know COVID isn't necessarily going away. If we can try to encourage people to apply early, you know, people can apply for absentee ballots right now. So why not start getting that information out there? You know, hey, request a calendar year application or absentee ballot, and you'll be covered for both August and November.
Great. Any other questions, comments? So this is, if there are none, I guess the one thing that we talked about on Friday was Kayla is, Clerk Fillon is the chief election officer for the county. She's already working with the clerks. I think, look to her to start a plan and bring it back to us, and by way of Clerk Kramer, so that we can start thinking about our role and how we collaborate. And I think Alder Dalton, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that
Sure.
I did really appreciate the analysis and talking with the clerk and Marissa about kind of the experience of what happened in April. I think that our best option is really challenging the clerk's office to think about their communication strategy advanced, as we're talking about here, multiple months and weeks for both the August and the fall election, and that communication strategy in the context of what's happening statewide. So if there is state mailings, I think that mailing will likely cover what's necessary. And in our specific community, where 50% of residents are renters, and especially in August when there is the flux and transitioning often of eligible voters, that some of that communication might just be wasted or fall on, just be kind of useless. And I think that some of the mail itself being a slower format of communication could lead to more false positives, where people think that they're getting what they need and then they don't, and that creates extra work for our staff. And I think that just a broader thought process that's not mailing is probably appropriate.
Thank you. So we have no action. I look forward, and we'll probably see this coming back. I agree with Alder Shore. We shouldn't dismiss any of the options. The vote is too important. But more importantly, I am seriously concerned about the health and safety of not only our staff, but of course voters. So safe election, making sure everybody's at the polls, and I look forward to the leadership of Clerk Fillon and Clerk Kramer and all the other clerks. I'd probably be asking for some kind of outreach plan and strategies that you're going to employ.
Okay, happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you so much. And thank you for your dedicated work to make sure that one of the most important parts of our democracy is protected. I appreciate it. So, all right, moving on. Great discussion, important discussion. I know it took a long time, but it is really important that we have it. Review of disbursement of the COVID-19 Small Business Grant Program. I'm going to leave that to Corey and to Ryan. Probably start with Ryan first.
Sure. Thanks, everyone, for allocating this fund for our local businesses. As you can see throughout the memo, at the end of the day, we had roughly 147 total applicants, of which 73 received some type of funding from the city. Total amount requested roughly 230,000, which is an important number to note because that just indicates to us that there at the time was a major demand. Now, obviously with Executive Order 36, which is going to allow some of our local retailers, especially in the downtown area, to reopen on a pretty limited aspect, that will hopefully ease the economic impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's something that we're keeping a very close eye on. But prior to that, when we weren't 100% certain when some of our local businesses were going to be able to reopen, that 230,000 really indicated a significant demand for this grant money. Again, the average amount requested was just shy of $1,500. As you may recall, we did allocate up to $2,000 per application, but as you can see later on in the memo, the allocation was dispersed more than the 50 or so businesses that if we, everyone who came in got $2,000, we really tried to disperse it as much as possible to provide for the greatest impact going forward. So we opened it up at 8 a.m. on Thursday, the 8th of April. And within the first half hour, we had over 90 applications. And then after that, it really trickled down that we had fewer and fewer applications after that initial surge. And part of the reason for that was we had created this first come, first serve program, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the successes and failures of the program itself. So each application that came in was reviewed by myself, verifying that all the paperwork that was submitted was accurate, trying to align our resources with those who submitted everything on time and figuring out how do we have the greatest impact here and do further disbursement than just the first 50 that would have applied. And so what we ended up doing was essentially saying everyone who was eligible and applied within a timely manner got at least 1 month worth of mortgage or lease. And we did work through that process to verify, what the leases stated, made sure they had submitted their W-9s, although the W-9 component wasn't necessarily required, but that will be required in order for them to close out the grant at the end of this month. We also did verify, based on some of those sound principles that we had discussed at the last finance meeting, what does the full-time equivalent or franchise, is the business is the business not qualified because they've got over the 10 FTE employee, or are they a franchise business, or were they not in good standing with the city? We reviewed personal property taxes and then property taxes, or not in good standing with the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions. We reviewed each LLC or corporation that was provided to us to verify that they were in good standing, i.e. not administratively dissolved because they didn't fill out the proper paperwork, kind of a thing. So again, based on that, the above criteria, we narrowed it down to the 74 that received the funding there. And so then further on in the memo, you can see where we kind of narrowed it down a little bit further based on the industry. And as you can see, a number of our applicants were bar restaurants, small retail boutiques, and then personal service. I will state that I have never known anything about the salon industry given my situation on top of my head. But I learned a lot about the salon industry and how it works and how people rent chairs from other people and working through that process. And so we had a number of salons which are still not eligible to reopen under the governor's orders, apply for it and receive a fair amount of funding. at the end of it, really submitted to the Comptroller to do a final review of the businesses that were eligible, and we actually weeded it down even further, saying, you know, Ryan, you said this person was eligible, but, you know, per the safer at home order, they are able to operate. They have just chosen not to, kind of a thing, and working through that. And came up with our final list. We closed the application the Monday after it was opened, a little after 7:30 in the morning, allocated our grant funding and sent out notifications. I think it's important that we as a group review some of the successes and failures, and it'll give you a little bit of insight into how the program operated. But you know, if we were to go through this process again, there are things that I would change. First off, being the only person reviewing the grants as they came in, it was overwhelming. Put in a lot of hours over a weekend and part of the reason that it was overwhelming was, you know, we were at the end of April, May rents were coming due, May mortgages were coming due, and so our main objective was to get the money out as soon as possible. And we made the decisions and made announcements, I believe, within a week of the grant program opening. So from that perspective, I'm really happy and proud of what we've done. But on the flip side, I wish we would have had a set opening and a set closing, and then reviewed the applications a little bit slower to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes. And later on in this agenda, there were 2 mistakes that were made that you know, we are asking for some additional funding on. That we don't make it a first come first serve platform, but again, take time to review the applicants a little bit more, and maybe base it, you know, not necessarily on merit, but where are we really trying to focus our economic development policy? Should it be in the downtown area? There are other areas of the city that we can allocate more money towards, or things of that nature. Become a little bit more data driven with our future policy making from this perspective. It was the first stumbling block out of the gate was clarification on what FTE means. You know, there was confusion if full-time employee or full-time equivalent employee. So being a little bit more detailed in some of the abbreviations within the application itself. And then, of course, have a small group review the applications collectively if able, just so that you've got a wider group that can review each document and verify that everything is in order and that there's not going to be things that are missed. That's something that just if we were to ever do another program, I'd like the group to consider. We'll talk about it later, but there were 2 businesses that didn't receive funding that probably should have, and that was an oversight on my end. And we'll talk about that a little later. What I think is really important here, not only because I love maps, is that we look at where our areas of applicants came from. And so on page 14, you can see the heat map that our great GIS department put together for us. That little yellow blob, which actually isn't so little, has caused me a great amount of discomfort. That has indicated to us that our local businesses are downtown, that the city has spent millions of dollars in the last 2 decades to revitalize, are really struggling through this pandemic. And it was something that I really, when I saw the heat map come back, we knew that there were going to be a lot of downtown businesses apply, but seeing this caused me great concern that our downtown businesses were struggling even more than other parts of the city. And of course, that's just a residual effect of the safer at home order, where you have the folks out in Crossroads Commons, the Walmarts, the Lowe's, the Menards, whomever else that can operate. And this is a great example of Fall Line Outfitters, who is an outdoor shop, camping gear, all this different stuff. He could not operate, but the Walmarts of the world, which have an outdoor section and a camping section, could operate. And so the safer at home order, while I think intended very well, caused a great deal of economic stress on our local businesses because they could not operate unlike their larger counterparts. And arguably our local businesses are more able to control who's in their store, enforce social distancing, enforce folks wearing mask covering or face masks. And so Obviously really frustrating, but a number of the applicants that received funding were in the downtown area. And so this heat map was included just to give you an idea of where those areas were. And if we were to do another program, and I think that there's some merit to it, but that we really focus in our most distressed areas, and that's our downtown and arguably a little bit of our Church Street area. Part of the reason I included these 3D maps, other than I love mapping, was it further justifies additional funding for these types of programs in our downtown. Again, safer at home, the executive order came out today, and so we're kind of thinking as an economic response team, we're meeting tomorrow, you know, what's our next step, right? So had the safer at home order continue to be extended through June or July, I think that would have caused justification for further expenditures from the city to help another program that was focused on the downtown. But now that these smaller retailers can reopen, I think it causes us pause to say, okay, what's the next reasonable step based on the data? But again, these 3D maps here, the first one on the bottom of page 14 of your agenda packet, that's the assessed value per acre within the city. You can see our downtown and our historic neighborhood surrounding it. I have the highest assessed value per acre in general within the city, but the map that I think really speaks volumes is on the last page, page 15 of your agenda packet, and that's the city's tax revenue per acre. Again, you can see in our downtown area that we receive a higher revenue per acre, and so it's important that as we go forward and make these types of economic decisions, we take this into consideration. Where is our money best spent, and where are we going to be getting the highest return on these investments? The downtown area is arguably the best return on our investment if we were to do another round of COVID-19 grant funding. Again, the discussion isn't, and it's not agendaed this way, that we can't have a discussion whether or not we should be able to do this again. But you know, I'm trying to put you folks into my mind and how we would do another round if push would come to shove and we'd have that opportunity. So with that, I'd answer any questions that the committee may have, but that's all I have from the grant standpoint.
Director, can you just share your screen on those maps? Because I'm not sure that we've got a number of people who are members of the public.
Yes. I hope you can see that.
Yep.
Yeah, so
wonderful.
Here's the heat map. This yellow dot, or this yellow cloud, I guess I'll call it right here, is our downtown. And so when we were talking a little bit earlier about this being a concern, look at the rest of the city, which is outlined in blue. Our greatest need was in the downtown area. This is the assessed value per acre. Blues and purples or pinks are where we receive the highest assessed value per acre within the city. And then this is another 3D map. This is tax revenue per acre. Again, this is our downtown area. You can see that we have the highest tax revenue per acre in our downtown, and that relates a lot to density. But again, the city has invested millions of dollars in the downtown area in the last few years, and what we're trying to avoid from the economic development standpoint is catastrophic loss because of COVID in our downtown, right? We don't want businesses to close. We want to be supporting the folks that are down there that make it such a thriving place. And part of the reason that we have such very, very low vacancy rates within our downtown storefronts. So with that, I'll stop ranting.
All right. You can take the screen down now. Thank you. I thought it was just important to share that. So there's one more component of this, and I'll just kind of do it briefly and then ask Corey to just define something for me. I was contacted by someone, and that person was quite critical of our distribution of money, and I had a very good conversation with them. It wasn't mean-spirited at all. And this person said to me, you're giving the false sense that you're not using tax dollars, because you said you were using fund balance. Well, we used fund balance, and the fund balance is made up of a number of things that go into it, including tax dollars. So I just wanted, Corey, real quickly, so that everybody's on the same page, what fund balance is. Just real quick, the number of things that went into it. You did kind of talk about it when we approved this, but just one more time.
Sure. So basically, fund balance is the savings or the reserves that we have as a city. And really, it's a result of our total financial performance. So it's a result of revenues coming in higher than expected or than what they were budgeted. It's a result of expenditures coming in lower than what they were budgeted. And then also, it's a result of getting some of our IOUs paid back, and that was a factor as well for 2019, especially for some of our TIF districts that are starting to be able to repay the general fund, and we're able to get some of that savings back. So those are the basic components as far as why we have fund balance, why we had a good year for 2019. It was really those three. I kind of highlighted revenues because I would say the higher revenues played the biggest role in fund balance, but of course it's really your total financial performance as a package. Do your total revenues exceed your total expenditures? So that really includes everything, and it's really a result of everything. And then the only other thing that I would note on fund balance is, you know, it sounds like we're drawing down savings, and technically that would be correct. But the only reason why we did that was because our savings increased for 2019. So had that not happened, it would have been a lot more difficult to do this. So as far as, you know, to say, okay, well, you were drawing down, you know, your savings. Well, you know, what we were looking at was that our savings had grown, giving us the ability to do this. Now, if our savings had been very stable or flat across the board and we were starting to spend savings, then I would agree, and then it would have been a different conversation.
Thank you, Corey. So again, it includes tax revenues, other revenues, very good budgeting, our departments coming in with lower expenses, all of those things contribute. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood it is a variety of things. So thank you, Corey. Mr. Mayor, I believe you have a question.
Thank you. Not a question, just a comment. I think Director Karnowski kind of downplayed the amount of time and effort that was put in. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that the director put in a lot of time, along with the rest of his team, to make this happen, because as he said, the goal was all along to get money into the hands of the people that need it as quickly as possible. And that took a very long time, a lot of hours, and a tremendous amount of effort and commitment on behalf of the director and his team. And I just don't want that to be understated at all.
Thank you. Very important. Yes, thank you. I know I visited one of the downtown retailers that I visit frequently and picked up my order, and the appreciation and the near tears on the part of the business owner was, they were very grateful for this work and all of us. And so thank you, everybody, in particular, Director Karnowski and his team. So questions for the director or Corey at this point about the distribution of that money? All right. Hearing none. And the sirens are going past my house, which you can probably hear.
As long as they're going past your house.
They are
President
going
Johnson, rather
past.
than stop.
I see Chief Finn is on his little thingy there, radio. So I'm assuming he's busy doing what he needs to do to keep us all safe. All right, moving on. The next item on the agenda is funding for the correction of errors in administrating the COVID-19 Small Business Grant Program. Ryan, you talked about it a little bit. Anything else?
Sure. So contrary to what my dogs might think, I'm not a perfect human being. So we did have two administrative oversights. Fall Line Outfitters, which is one of our great downtown businesses, had submitted everything within a few minutes, actually, of the grant opening, and should have been awarded some type of grant funding. But for whatever reason, through the initial review of the application, it was tagged as incomplete. Upon reviewing the materials after receiving the denial letter and calling my office to get verification and working through Alder Jennings and a few others, we did verify that they had submitted everything within the correct amount of time. And so I am requesting an additional allocation of $725, which is about 1 month's rent for the administrative oversight. The second one was Hawaiian Tanning Studio. I had originally deemed that they were a franchise business, but then upon additional review, I mistook Hawaiian Tanning Studio and Sun City Tan, or Sun Tan City, as both franchise businesses, although Hawaiian Tanning is not a franchise business. They had submitted everything within a timely amount, and so I am requesting additional $1,200, which is 1 month's worth of rent for the administrative oversight on my end. So in total, it's an additional $1,925 being requested to correct the administrative oversight, and staff's recommendation is approval.
All right, Alder Shore, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I move approval of the additional amount of $1,925 for those two grants.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion and a second, so second by Dalton. Any additional discussion?
I have a question. Where would that additional money be coming from?
Corey?
So this would be also coming from fund balance. So it would be coming from the same place as the first 100,000.
Thank you. Any other questions?
After this, sorry.
Go ahead.
After this is paid, how much will be left in our fund balance?
So the fiscal year 2020 is still underway, obviously. We expect this to draw fund balance back down. But the thing is, this spending, along with everything else that goes on for 2020, so between the revenue shortfalls, the changes in expenses, basically that's going to change fund balance overall. So it still is, it's not something that's sort of set in stone, that's static until you do the end of the year.
Right.
It evolves throughout the year, but I do think that, we can afford the extra $1,925 and absorb some of these shortfalls and hopefully still be in an okay place in terms of fund balance. But it's really going to depend on how the financial situation develops throughout the year. And then the other thing that we have to keep in mind is if we spend too much in fund balance, we might not have basically money left in fund balance to roll as much into capital as we have in previous years. So, do I think that we can afford the $1,925? I think we should be okay, but it is, worth noting that, yeah, we want to really be conscious of these expenses as they start up. We're only into May. We could have a lot more extenuating circumstances come up. So definitely we want to be careful about how much we spend so that we don't end up in a situation where now we're not able to fund our 2021 capital needs.
Answer your question adequately, Alder Morrow?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee or comments, anyone? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know where Alder Slawinski must still be having trouble, so although anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions?
Aye.
Oh, you're there. Thank you.
I'm here.
You're here. I finally found you.
So
All right.
President Johnson, Alder Slawinski is here, but he's on his phone, so he doesn't have the ability to unmute himself on the phone.
Okay, that's good. We'll just keep on going then. All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda. Accept proposal for completing a strategic plan. I can tell you that this was a very thorough vetting. I spent about 8 hours of my PTO time to be on the selection committee, and really enjoyed working with Ryan and Jeff Schuler, interviewing all of the, or not all of the applicants, first reviewing all of the proposals and then inviting in the proposers for interviews. It was enlightening and enjoyable, and met some really very nice people. So I'll hand it off to you, Director.
Thank you. So as folks may recall, in late December, we had brought the second or the reissue of the request for proposal for consultant to develop the city's first strategic plan. Those proposals, when the RFP went out in late December, proposal was due on February 28th. And in all, we received 10 proposals from various firms from all over the United States and arguably throughout the world, which is kind of interesting that there is so much interest in our strategic plan. As you may recall, in 2018, when we did the first round, or when we did the original RFP, we only received 2 proposals. So was very happy with the variety of proposals. From there, my department provided a few elected officials, all the department heads, and a few others within the community to review each proposal and rank them, essentially based on a 0 to 100 point scale. Just really rough based on municipal experience, their public stakeholder involvement in their processes, their written work of the past and other strategic planning initiatives, their budget schedule, and then of course their insurance minimums. From there, we took the top 7 groups and interviewed them. Myself, President Johnson, and Director Jeff Schuler of Portage County Planning and Zoning were the interview committee. And it was a very unique time because of COVID, where we did all of our interviews via Zoom. First round of interviews, it was much more structured. The proposers were coming in to do a 20 to 30 minute presentation for the interview committee. We asked them what I thought were some really insightful questions about their past experience, and just trying to get a feel for who the right fit would be for the city to draft our first strategic plan. From there, we narrowed it down to 3, brought the 3 back on a Zoom call and had I thought a really good, candid conversation about how they would work with the city and how they would begin the public process as a result of the COVID pandemic. And from that, we narrowed it down and had some really good discussion and debate within the 3 of us. And we decided that Alchemy, which is a Iowa-based rural community development company, should be awarded the contract. And actually, they will be subcontracting some of the public engagement with Create Portage County to help get some of the more, I would say, groups that historically are not included as part of these stakeholder conversations as part of it. A good example is our growing Hmong population is typically not involved in a lot of these public processes. And so the committee felt it was important that Create, and through their connections, can get some of these marginalized groups to the table to have a conversation about the future public policy making through our strategic plan. Alchemy's total fee is $81,905. Not the cheapest, not the most expensive, and we did work out the contract itself, which is in the packet, where we would cut 25% of the cost up front, 10% due each month, and then we would withhold the final 15% of the contract until the Common Council adopts the strategic plan, or December 31st, 2020. Again, I'd like to thank President Johnson for taking time, and Director Schuler, and staff's recommendation is to award the contract to Alchemy so they can get started. Later on in the document, you'll find the firms that submitted in their budgets. We did not include the scoring total because it was a really rough way to just start gauging and narrowing down our applicants. So with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Just wanted to add too that when we came down to the last three, by the time we were done, Director Schuler, Director Kronowski, and I were like almost unanimously, simultaneously, Alchemy stood out. Two things still stand out for me. Number one, we asked about the challenges of COVID, and they said this is an opportunity to think about how we can reshape our community. And then, I mean, it was just, they didn't see this as a challenge. They saw it as an opportunity, which I think is a very good approach. The other thing that really struck me is they were not walking away until the implementation plan was on the ground and running. So in other words, it's not a plan to put on a shelf, it's a plan to make happen. So I was incredibly impressed. They're very creative, very, very bright, and very focused on what they call rural communities, which Portage County in many ways is one of those nice rural communities with a bit of an urbanness that makes us very special. Happy to take questions for the director on this, or me. All right, if there are no questions, I'd entertain a motion.
I would move approval of the strategic plan contract to Alchemy.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
There is a second. Any possible conversation that I missed? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No. Abstentions? Motion carries. We will have.
Did Jeremy get to vote?
What's that?
Did Jeremy get to vote?
Oh, Jeremy, did you vote? I'm sorry, I forgot about you again. Where are you? There you are. Alder Slawinski, did you vote?
Alder Slawinski had come back in through, I believe, the Zoom application. And he is unmuted. I'm assuming he has some technical difficulties still. I don't know if he can hear us, but he is not muted at this point.
Okay. Well, I hope he's able to sort of fix all of that. Regardless, we do have, the motion does pass. And we'll ask Director Kronowski to finish the work on the contract. Next item on our agenda, sorry, this is a long one, but that's what happens. The next is the approval of claims paid. I would entertain a motion on that.
I'd move approval of the claims paid.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the claims paid. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Morrow. Any discussion about the claims paid? Anything extraordinary that should be of note? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the claims paid, please say aye.
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 Give Alder
Aye.
Slawinski, he's still on mute. Anyone opposed? No. Abstentions?
The alder just took himself off of mute.
Alder Slawinski, did you want to vote on that? Gosh darn, I cannot hear you.
Nope, I can't hear him either.
Okay. All right. Motion is approved and the claims of, motion is approved to approve the claims paid. Thank you. Item 10 is adjourn into closed the session at approximately 7:10. Wrong. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85(1) (e) for deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session on the following. A, negotiating the terms of an amendment to the development agreement relating to a project at 111 Division Street in Tax Incremental District Number 5. And B, negotiating the terms of a potential purchase of the property in Tax Incremental District Number 5. I would entertain a motion on that agenda item.
I motion that we go into closed session.
There is a motion on the floor by Alder Morrow to go into closed session.
Second.
And we have a second by Alder Shore. Who is going to read the roll call?
I can. So-
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Johnson,
Aye.
Slawinski. Okay. Shore,
Aye.
Morrow,
Aye.
Dalton.
Aye.
Okay, and we'll try one more time, Slawinski.
And he is off mute. Give me a second. Let me see if I can get the chat to work.
Oh, that might be a way. Good idea. If he's on Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, with the technical difficulties, I don't know, but I just sent him a chat message asking if he's
Sure.
here.
In between open and closed session, let me use this moment to move for a short break.
Fair enough.
So, President Johnson, so hang on one second.
Sure.
So two things. One, Alder Slawinski can participate via chat. So I asked him how
Okay.
he voted, whether or not to go into closed session. We will be having to take a bit of a break. Oh, and he says yes to go into closed session.
Okay.
You can let the record reflect that.
Yeah,
The chats are saved as well. I do have some housekeeping that needs to be done in regards to the closed session. He's also coming in by phone. Sorry, Jeremy, Alder Slawinski is coming in by phone as well.
Okay.
So during closed session, once you do the roll call, Madam President, I have to put people out into a waiting room.
Yep.
So they are not allowed to participate. During that time, because I have to do this individually, during that time, you're welcome to get up and move around or do whatever
Okay.
things you need to do. So go ahead and do that when you're
All right.
ready.
All right. We have a roll call vote in the affirmative. We will go into closed session at 8:23 p.m.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.